Hey, it's DK, and welcome back to not 52 skills in 52 weeks, but something a bit different for this channel. Not to say that I've stopped doing skills, I've actually continued doing them at an accelerated rate even since I stopped making the videos. But I wanted to talk about the new year. New year, new you, right? And you've probably set a New Year's resolution similar to I have, where I'm gonna get back into YouTube and make a video, as you can see here in January. But there's something funny about how we create New Year's resolutions and feel different every year. And then there's something interesting about how 92% of New Year's resolutions fail. There's also, in January, 2 different days that are significant to a New Year's resolution. By the second Friday of January, there's a day called Quitter's Day, where 23% of people will have stopped doing the New Year's resolution they set out to do. Then by the end of the month, end of January, they have 42% of people have stopped. Why is that? Well, I want to tell you that it's not a people problem, it's a systems problem. Let's talk about it. So why do New Year's resolutions fail, and how are they structurally flawed? Number 1, there's an arbitrary starting line. January 1st means nothing to your brain. It's a new year, but it's not a new you, as much as you want to say it is. And here's the thing. For most of human history, New Year wasn't tied to January 1st. It was tied to nature, equinoxes, harvests, floods, not arbitrary calendar dates. Reason number 2, there's too long of a time frame. Usually with New Year's resolutions, we think, this is the year. I have all year to do this. And then the novelty wears off. In a few weeks, a few days. You go to the gym, you try that new sport, or you start that new skill. But then you say, I'll take a break. And then one day turns to 2. And then you say, I'll just do it next week. I'm pretty busy this week. You lose the why before you lose the what. Because the what was so clear, but the why, the reason you were doing it, was either too hollow or just not sound enough. Reason 3, rigid deadlines. You think you have to achieve it by December 31st, or by this month, or that month, or you have to do it by a certain time. But in reality, the goals and resolutions we set for ourselves don't need to be tied to arbitrary dates. Because life is based on the growth that you have. You don't need to set a time to it. You just need to set goals and landmarks to get there. In reality, you're just following someone else's regimen. You think a new year is a new you. But a new year can happen at any time that you decide. And it all starts with the systems you have in place. If the system you have in place is based on new year, new me, that's a broken system. But before we talk about what systems do work for you, let's go back into the history of resolutions and learn about where this came from. Back in the olden days, resolutions weren't really a thing. It was more of a guild system. Medieval guilds had apprenticeships that turned into journeymen and eventually masters. But here's the key. When an apprentice was able to make a masterpiece, they could become a master themselves. The usual journey was apprentice to journeyman to master. But what's interesting is we differentiate between an apprentice who became a master almost instantly, and journeymen who are essentially intermediate at what they do, sometimes never become masters because they needed proof based on their own individual skills. And here's the permission I want to give you. It's okay to not be a master. You can still be really good at something like a journeyman was, or even really great. Maybe you're better at working together with other people, in conjunction with other people. And that's okay. You don't have to be a master at everything. Being really good at what you do shows the skill and effort you have. Master is just a title at the end of the day. The time you took created eligibility, but the skill you had determined the advancement. There's a famous story about Leonardo da Vinci. His master, Verrocchio, saw his young apprentice's work, and when they collaborated together on a painting, Verrocchio looked at it and said, "I'm done. You're better than me." Well, he probably didn't say those words exactly. He probably was more refined and Italian about it. But even the greatest artists knew that they were always learning. The same was true for philosophers. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, said at an old age, "I'm still making progress." He didn't claim to be a sage, a perfect wise person. He admitted that he was still learning, still growing. And even the words we use have changed. The word amateur used to mean one who loves. It was a compliment. And a dilettante meant one who delights. It wasn't an insult. Industrialization and the modern world have turned these words negative. So embrace those stages. Try to find yourself at the amateur stage, the dilettante stage, and find the systems that work for you. So to be able to find your system, I have 4 systems that you could try to utilize based on what you like. It's really based on what you enjoy. Those 4 systems are age-based themes, seasonal quarterly goals, phase-based progression, and project-based learning. Let me break down each one. First is the age-based themes. Instead of January 1st being your new year, what if your birthday was your reset point? Each year of your life gets a theme. Not planned on January 1st, but planned on your birthday. Or even in retrospect, in the new birthday you planned the last one. For me, 32 was Iceland. That was my main trip and my main experience. For 33, who knows what it'll be. Age-based themes take the pressure off January 1st. Your new year happens when you say it does. Or I guess what your body says it does. System 2. Seasonal and quarterly goals. Instead of thinking in 12-month chunks, think in 90-day cycles. Historically, this aligns with how humans actually lived, following harvest seasons, equinoxes, natural rhythms, and modern research backs this up. Companies that review goals quarterly generate 31% greater returns than those reviewing annually. But why does it work? Well, shorter feedback loops, less overwhelm, and flexibility to adapt when life changes. Because life will change over 90 days. You can pivot without feeling like you failed your entire year. You just failed the quarter. Or if you failed at all, you learned something. System 3. Phase-based progression. This is my system, along with another one. And it's based on the medieval guild model we talked about earlier. Instead of time-bound goals, you have milestone-bound goals. You advance when you demonstrate capability, not when the calendar says so. A good example of this is when I tried doing 52 skills in 52 weeks. That was one new skill every week. It was a pretty rigid weekly structure. And I stopped at week 13. But I didn't fail. I learned something about myself, I continued those skills, but the weekly structure just doesn't work for my brain. Trying to do something every week didn't really pan out. But the phases do. Some phases can take 2 weeks, some can take 6 months. The milestone determines when I'm ready, not the calendar. And I also decide when I move on to the next phase. And just like the guilds, you're ready when you prove readiness, not when the time passes. You can run multiple phases in parallel. Right now, I'm in phase 1 of the changes of my life that I started last year after I stopped doing the week 13. And I'm also working on video content while also just completed my home lab infrastructure. They're all progressing at their own pace. But they're not all at the same phase. And that's okay. System 4. This is the other system that I use. Project-based learning. Instead of saying I will learn Python, say I will build a RAG system. Instead of saying I will get better at cooking, I will cook 10 recipes from this cookbook. Build X creates tangible feedback loops. You either built it or you didn't. There's no ambiguity. For example, I built my home lab. I could have said I'll build a home lab and then I'll do something else, or I'll try to build a whole entire tech server. But I built my home lab and that's all I needed and backed up my photos. Now, these aren't the only systems. You need to find yours. Experiment, mix and match. The point is, you need a system that works for your brain. So to help you out, I created a couple of documents, or pretty much one big document, of the different systems that I mentioned here and the different avenues you can take with them. I recommend going through all of them and just mix and matching what's able to be done. Now, other than systems, you also need to change yourself mentally. Resolutions create pressure. I must achieve this by X amount of time. And if you don't have that goal done by X amount of time, you're gonna put yourself down, hate yourself. And if you struggle towards the goal that's too far or too lofty, you'll end up giving up on yourself. But the systems we just talked about, they help you make progress at your pace. You can stop whenever you want because you created a system with stopping points. Life gets in the way, and it's true, but you have the goals, you have the phases, you have ambitions that can be brought back to later, no matter what happens in your life. That way, you can take a break without feeling guilty. I did the same with my home lab. It sat for months after doing phase 1, but once I was finally able to get back into phase 2, I started it and finally finished it after phase 4 was done months later after that. You can be a journeyman and not feel like you have to master it. You can just have it as part of your life and not feel like you need to master it. Just continue to work on it. And when someone sees your work and calls you a master, that's great. And if they say it's really good or it needs some work, that's awesome too. That's feedback. Enjoying the journey is the main focus. And people seeing that progress also will inspire you and inspire them. Finding your way is the main focus here. Not following someone else's regimen, not defining it by what other people see in you. Finding your way, your system, and your journey. That process to success is based on your success and your systems. That's what matters. You'll find links down below to guides on all 4 systems with step-by-step instructions on how to use them. I put them in a document, but if you'd like, I can also make an Obsidian for you or a Notion page that is a little bit more structured and a little bit more tied down. Let me know in the comments. At the end of the day, these aren't rigid rules. They're frameworks defining your system. You have to remove the stranglehold that you have on the systems and goals you set. Learn to trust your systems that you've put in place and be able to succeed in those goals. And the work continues even past that. If you complete all the phases or all the goals you set, whether you do it at a specific time or you do it earlier or later, then elongate it, add on to it. It means that you're still on that journey. What's the next path? What's the next goal? It's the journey of being human, striving for the next thing that gives you meaning and finds you purpose. And if you failed your New Year's resolution, you didn't fail. You just needed a different system. Thanks for watching. This was CK, and have a great day. Bye.